For a century, one company owned everything in this town. Every house, every store, even the fire trucks, and the strangest part, the people here loved it. Let's go back and see it. Redwood dust in the air, mill whistles instead of alarm clocks. A town built entirely of the wood it cut, every wall, every roof, every pew in the church. And this is a real photograph. Scotia, California, 1912, America's last true company town, and at the end of the street, one of the largest redwood mills on Earth. This is the story of the company town that worked, and of the thing that finally killed it. It came from 3,000 miles away, wearing a suit, and what it was hunting wasn't the town at all. Company towns have a reputation, and it's ugly. Coal camps where miners were paid in fake money that only worked at the company store. Mill villages where losing your job meant losing your house by Friday. In America, company town usually means a trap. Scotia was supposed to be exactly that. Founded in 1863 as Forestville and renamed Scotia in 1888, the new name, the story goes, settled by a coin toss in honor of the Nova Scotia lumbermen who filled its bunkhouses. The town belonged completely to the Pacific Lumber Company. Around 270 houses, most of them trim little redwood cottages with porches. The shopping center, the schools, the churches. A grand old theater built of solid redwood where the whole town watched the same picture on Saturday night. A company doctor, a company fire department. If a light bulb burned out on your porch, a company electrician came and changed it. If your fence sagged, a company carpenter fixed it. The company's name was on your paycheck, your front door, and your water bill. There was no mayor, no city council. There was a personnel office. By every rule of American history, this place should have been a nightmare. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is what the company did with all that power. From 1905, Pacific Lumber was run by the Murphy family, and the Murphys ran it like no lumber company on Earth. The timber business was a slash-and-run industry. Cut a forest flat, close the mill, and move the whole operation to the next valley, leaving a ghost town behind. That is where most company towns went to die. The Murphys refused to play. While competitors leveled entire forests, Pacific Lumber cut selectively, taking at most 70% of the mature trees in a stand and leaving the rest to hold the hillsides. They pioneered a policy called sustained yield, never cut faster than the forest grows back. It meant slower money forever instead of fast money once. In an industry famous for boom and bust, Scotia did neither. Workers got pensions, free life insurance, college scholarships for their kids. Rent on a company cottage ran far below anything else in the county. Through the Great Depression, the company held onto its people while half the industry stood in bread lines. Sons followed fathers onto the mill floor for 4 generations, and Pacific Lumber had almost no debt. None. More than a century of quiet profit, standing on the most valuable private redwood forest on the planet. That sentence sounds like a happy ending. On Wall Street in 1985, it read as something else entirely, an invitation. In September 1985, a Texas financier named Charles Hudowitz and his company, Maxim, launched a hostile takeover of Pacific Lumber at $40 a share. He didn't use his own money. The deal ran on roughly $900 million of borrowed cash, including $450 million in junk bonds arranged by Michael Milken at Drexel Burnham, the most infamous debt machine of the decade. A company that had refused to owe anyone a nickel for a century was bought with a mountain of IOUs. The board resisted, then folded. By the end of September, it was done, 122 years of stewardship, transferred in a stock transaction. Within months, the Murphy running the company had resigned. Hudowitz flew north to meet his new employees, mill workers, loggers, people whose grandparents had built the town. Standing in front of them, he offered a joke. "There's a story about the golden rule," he said. "He who has the gold rules." Then the new owners reached into the pension fund. $55 million came out of the workers' $93 million retirement pool, and what was left was moved into annuities from an insurance company that later collapsed. The town now belonged to the debt, and debt is always hungry. There was only one thing in Scotia that could feed it: trees. Some of them had been alive for 1,000 years, redwoods 300 feet tall, the largest private old-growth forest left on Earth. Under the Murphys, they were an inheritance. Under the debt, they were collateral. The cutting rate roughly doubled. Clear-cuts opened where selective logging had held for generations, because junk bonds don't wait for a forest to grow back. And then the outside world arrived in Scotia's forest. Protesters chained themselves to trees. Loggers who had never seen a picket line found themselves on the evening news. The fight over this forest, the timber wars, became the loudest environmental battle in America, and it got ugly on both sides. In December 1997, a 23-year-old activist calling herself Julia Butterfly Hill climbed a 1,000-year-old redwood named Luna, and did not come down for 738 days, 2 years on a 6-foot platform 18 stories up. She rode out El Niño storms that bent the tree sideways, lived on supplies hauled up by rope, and gave interviews by solar-powered phone to reporters on every continent, until the company agreed to spare the tree and a 200-foot buffer around it. By then, even Washington had seen enough. In March 1999, the federal government and the state of California paid $480 million to take 7,500 acres, the headwaters forest, out of the company's hands entirely. The government had saved the trees, but nobody was coming to save the company. Because here's what everyone gets wrong about Scotia. Ask what killed the last company town and people reach for the obvious villains, the unions, the environmentalists, the lumber market. Wrong. What killed Pacific Lumber was the one thing it had banned for over a century: debt. The interest never slept. The company sold assets, cut harder, refinanced, and the mathematics only moved in one direction. By 2006, the company was desperate enough to do the unthinkable. It announced it would sell the town itself, the houses, the buildings, the whole model, to raise cash. Even that wasn't enough. On January 18, 2007, the Pacific Lumber Company, 144 years old, a company that had carried its people through 2 world wars and the Great Depression, filed for bankruptcy. The debt had eaten through the forest and finally reached the company itself. In 2008, a court carved up the body. The sawmill went to new owners, the Humboldt Redwood Company, who, in a bitter little irony, brought back the old Murphy playbook: selective cutting, sustained yield. The forest got its old rules back, but the town, the houses, the theater, the hotel was handed to a creditor, a New York hedge fund. America's last company town now belonged to a company that had never even seen it, and that should have been the end of Scotia. It wasn't. Something nobody predicted happened next. The town outlived its owner. The people of Scotia stayed. The mill kept cutting redwood under the new owners. In 2014, a community services district run by residents, not a corporation, took over the water, the sewers, the streets. And then, house by house, the unthinkable: Scotia went up for sale, not to a developer, to its own people. Mill workers and retirees, buying the company cottages their families had rented for 4 generations. By early 2026, about 170 of the town's 270 homes had reportedly passed into private hands, ordinary deeds, ordinary owners, for the first time in 160 years. The company that owned everything is gone. The town it built is still standing: the century-old theater, the mill, the rows of redwood cottages under the fog, owned at last by the people who always called it home. Walk down Main Street today, and it looks almost exactly like the postcards from 1912. The company built this place to last forever. It just never imagined forever without itself in it. America's last company town didn't vanish the way company towns usually do. The company vanished instead. If you know a company town or any place that quietly disappeared, tell me in the comments. That's where the next story comes from. I'm Vanishing era.